I used to hike a lot. I'd hike up Camelback Mountain, and that was sort of my soul-nourishing activity, was to hike. And there were these air quality alerts where they would say, don't go outside because it's too unhealthy. And that just seemed so ridiculous to me. Like, why can't we go outside because it's too unhealthy? Well, what happened to the air?
Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, brought to you by Modern Well, a beautiful woman-centered collaborative workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, April Seifert, psychologist, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. Each week, I will introduce you to a different woman who is succeeding and inspiring others in one way or another. We'll dive into her story, her successes, failures, and the lessons she has learned along the way, all with the goal of inspiring you to listen to that inner voice who keeps reminding you that there is something you want to take action on. You are so much more capable and powerful than you give yourself credit for. Inside of you is a woman on fire. Let's let her out and see what happens. Here we go. Welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host. And before I dive into anything today, I just want to take a moment to pause, because today's episode, this episode, is episode 100. And I'm kind of choking up even saying that, because when I started this podcast, I had no idea whether it would be something that I would enjoy doing, whether I'd be able to get guests, how long I would be able to keep it up and sustain it. And it has grown over time because of you guys, because you have continued to tune in every week and listen to these incredible stories and support these women whose, journeys I'm sharing with you and stories I'm sharing with you through this amazing medium. So I just wanted to pause to take a second. Maybe a little victory lap. Let's just say I'm kind of boasting a little bit. I've hit episode 100. That feels really good. And I want to take a chance to thank you all for being here, for supporting me, and for helping me grow this thing and shape it into the podcast that it is today. Because just for funsies, if you go back and listen to the first few episodes, it sounds nothing like it used to. And that transition and that shift over time has happened really organically as we've all gotten to know each other and figured out what this podcast actually is. So thank you to every one of you who has ever listened to an episode. Thank you to every woman who has shared her stories along the way. It has just been the most incredible ride, and I cannot wait to see where the next 100 episodes lead us. So wanted to pause and just say thank you, thank you, thank you. And hooray for episode 100. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that today's episode is being brought to you by the Life Design Lab. So if you listen to my recent episodes, you know that the doors are currently open, but only for one more day. They close on January 31st. Doors for enrollment into my 6-week online life design program. In this program, we'll spend 6 weeks, each week doing an online live design sprint. So if you took my webinar and you enjoyed that, it'll have a look and feel very similar to that, but a bit more interactive. Each week, we're going to tackle one main section of life design. And my goal for you, and it'll include a lot of psychology too. So I should say that as well. It'll include quite a bit of work on the barriers and identity issues that can keep us all from making progress and going after the things that we want. So lots of that as well. If you are interested, head over to aprilseifert.com. There's a banner on the top of that website that'll take you right there. You can get more information about it. Like I said, doors close on January 31st. That's one more day. So please, if you're interested, check it out fast. Get in now. It's going to be so much fun. And even beyond spending 6 weeks really taking stock of your life and really doing a deep dive into who you are and how to make your life more vibrant and joyful for you, you're going to learn a framework that you can come back to and that you can apply again and again. So I really wanted to put together something that would have value beyond just the 6 weeks of us spending time together. And I really feel like I've done that. So I'm excited for everybody who has already signed up. Oh my God, I can't wait to work with you. I'm freaking out and counting the days. But for those of you who haven't had a chance to sign up yet, Please check it out. I'll drop a link in this episode description as well. Check it out. See if it's for you. Shoot me a message if you have questions. I would love to work with you in that capacity. All right, on to this week's episode. This week, you are going to meet an incredible woman named Melissa Rapapport Shifman. She is a sustainability consultant, and she is the author of the book, Building a Sustainable Home, Practical Green Design Choices for Your Health, Wealth, and Soul. Now, obviously, in her interview, we get into a good discussion about the concept of sustainability and how all of us can play a role in making our homes more sustainable, energy efficient, water efficient, all of those pieces. We definitely talk about that. We talk about the work that she does with companies and businesses, helping to make them more sustainable, so an even bigger reach with that work. But we get into the coolest conversation at the end of her episode. Please, please, please stick around to that, because it's so incredible how this woman has gone through this winding path and found herself doing work that absolutely fuels her passion. But like so many people who go down an entrepreneurial path, and in particular women who feel compelled to fit their work and fit their career into the cracks of the rest of their life, caring for, kids and living life in other ways, so many of us feel like we lack that self-value or that self-worth that comes from a job title. So many times, when people ask us what we do, lots of people can easily answer that question by saying, oh, I am the, insert your title, of, insert your department, at, insert the name of your company. I'm the VP of marketing at Target. That's not my job, by the way. So I don't want people to feel like I'm masquerading as that. That's not my job. But anyway, lots of times we derive a lot of self-worth from our ability to answer that question and have an answer that feels really puffy and important. But when you don't have that, for example, when you're an entrepreneur and you're just building your own company, or you're cobbling together work from 4 or 5 different ventures because that's just how life works right now, it can feel like you aren't as valuable. And so we get into such a good discussion about that. So if you at all feel that way, or you know someone who does, that is the part of this discussion that is for you. This episode is amazing. I can't wait for you all to meet Melissa, and please take a peek at her show notes page for a link to her book on Amazon. It is absolutely beautiful. It features a gorgeous photo of her home, which is where we recorded this interview. I can't wait for you guys to meet her. Melissa, I'm so excited that you are here for this interview. This is awesome. Thanks so much.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we had to work hard to make this interview happen. There were some snafus today with scheduling and location and all of the things, but we are here now. And I feel like this was almost meant to be, given where we ended up recording this interview. And I'll tell you guys listening to this a little more about that in just a minute. Before we get into all of that, help us get to know you a little bit. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you are into these days.
Okay, so I am from Minneapolis. I grew up here. I left for a while. I am into basically sustainable homes these days. I have a book that was just released. It's called Building a Sustainable Home, Practical Green Design Choices for Your Health, Wealth, and Soul.
I love that. That covers off on all the bases. I mean, that's all the things, right? Health, wealth, soul.
Yeah. So we LEED certified our home 10 years ago. And LEED is an acronym for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So it's sort of a best practices green rating system. And I wanted to LEED certify our home because I wanted to understand what really were the costs and benefits, what was worth it, what was not. And now that we've lived in our home for 10 years, I can go back and say, well, here are the things I wish we would have done differently, or these things were totally worth it. So the book really is kind of that story. When we were building our home, I had bought all the guidebooks around, what you're supposed to do to go green. And they were overwhelming. Pretty intimidating in some cases, a lot of technical jargon. They could be boring, and trying to get through the LEED reference manual all by itself.
It sounds interesting. It sounds like riveting, the LEED reference manual.
Yeah, it's really not accessible to most homeowners. So
oddly from the title.
Yeah, so I wanted to sort of translate all of that and make these things more accessible. And over time, as I worked in the sustainability world, I really kind of came to the conclusion that there really are only 3 reasons, and they're big reasons for your health, wealth, and soul.
I love that. Okay, so I want to do, before we jump, we're going to dive kind of deep into that topic because your book is awesome, and I'm excited for people to hear more about the topic itself. But your story, your journey is a really interesting one because we were talking a little bit before we started recording. You've had one of those classic windy paths a bit. So can you give us sort of the high level of how in the heck you found yourself in this position? Because it wasn't a straight path. It doesn't sound like.
Yeah, it wasn't a straight path. And in fact, I think the things I do now, they weren't even a concept back when I was in school. So I went to school at Georgetown University. I majored in government, and I worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years, and I managed the issue areas of environment and energy. So sort of from a public policy perspective, I was interested in that. I went on to get my graduate degree in public policy, and I also got my MBA. And coming out of business school, I was sort of set on the corporate ladder. I worked for the airlines for about 6 years in finance, financial analysis, financial planning, doing a lot of cost-benefit analysis. And then I moved back to Minneapolis, and I worked for Capella Education Company, and I was their vice president of business development. So I was I'd sort of in some way made it to the vice president level in a pretty short period of time coming out of business school. So that was sort of a more traditional definition of success. But there wasn't really a lot of satisfaction for me in terms of any type of cause that I was supporting. And the last job I had was frankly a little bit toxic. And so when I left and I got pregnant right after, no real coincidence there. I decided to commit myself to the world of sustainability and figure out how I could use my background, my education and experience in the best way to help basically the world become more sustainable. So I want to back up and tell a little story about why that mattered to me.
I love that. Yes.
When I was living in Phoenix, there were just several things that seemed sort of odd. One was there was just pervasive sun. It was very, very hot there. We were using so much air conditioning, yet we were not harnessing the power of the sun. So that was just sort of perplexing to me. Why don't we use more solar energy? The other thing about Phoenix is that it doesn't have a whole lot of natural water. And people were watering their lawns in the middle of the day, and the water would just evaporate. And the water quality wasn't very good either. But the big one for me was I used to hike a lot. I'd hike up Camelback Mountain, and that was sort of my soul-nourishing activity, was to hike. And there were these air quality alerts where they would say, don't go outside because it's too unhealthy. And that just seemed so ridiculous to me. Like, why can't we go outside because it's too unhealthy? Well, what happened to the air?
Right.
And mostly it's because we are burning fossil fuels in our cars, in our buildings, everywhere, that is making the air unhealthy.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I read the book by Paul Hawken called The Ecology of Commerce, which really dives deep into how businesses are sort of polluting the environment. But what I love about Paul Hawken is that he looks at things in a more positive way, and he isn't anti-corporate, he's pro-corporate. He's pro-businesses actually doing better. And that we can't really be anti-corporate. We have to all work on these problems together because we all share one planet.
Yeah. I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm struggling with where to go because there's about 5 things that you said that I really adore. And people who are listening to this, you probably know where I'm going to go first because this is always where I go first. But it's so neat in your backstory because you had this, you achieved this level in the corporate world that people work their careers to get to, right? People nearly sell their soul in the corporate world to get to the point that you were at. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from women who are either currently in that position or who made the decision to leave, who've said, it's not the achievement that makes you happy. It's not the title. It isn't your office or what it looks like. I recently met with a woman, and I'm not going to disclose who she is because she's going to be on a future episode and I'm really excited. But she said she was in the same position and she looked around her office and she's like, God, I've made it, right? Like giant windows, big, big, beautiful view of downtown Minneapolis and at the, C-suite of her company. And she looked around and she's like, I have nowhere else to go. I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not what I want to do. And this is not making me happy. Like, if I'm not happy yet, this isn't it. This path isn't it. And I would love to hear a little bit about the decision you made to leave that, because you basically turned in the direction of something you deeply cared about. And I think that's so cool and intentional. So I'd love to hear about that a little bit.
Well, so it was slightly, not completely intentional, partly because I was fired from my last job. But I sort of got myself fired in a weird way.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized that later, that the things I had done, I sort of, I think, convinced my boss that it wasn't a good fit. But the bigger decision then was, do I go back? Do I get my resume all buffed and shiny and try and go for that next VP level job? And where would that be?
Right.
And just looking around, there didn't seem to be that many jobs that really caught my interest, that were that interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And so I just decided to sort of take a break. And I had my first daughter. We were moving into a condo, and in between my first daughter and second daughter, I worked for a solar energy company part-time as sort of a marketing and sales consultant, because I really wanted to understand the economics of solar and why it wasn't more pervasive. So that was sort of the beginning of my self-education in the world of sustainability. So I learned about renewable energy. I met with a lot of people who were investing in wind energy, and this was over a decade ago. But then when we had the opportunity to build a house, the LEED rating system for homes had just come out. And so that really intrigued me, because I really wanted to understand that more. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure, okay, this is the direction I wanted to go. I just knew I wanted our home to be energy efficient and water efficient and be easier on the environment and be healthy for my family. The health theme kind of runs through because I'm very allergic to mold and mildew. I think everybody had some, adverse reaction to that, but I basically can't breathe in areas where there's mold. And the house that we bought that was on this lot had a really, really moldy basement, and I couldn't even go in there. So when we weren't looking to build a house, we just wanted to find a healthy house.
Right.
And this house was very unhealthy that we had purchased. And so we looked at potentially remodeling it, and trying to get the mold out of the basement and preventing it in the future was just kind of a problem that was not easily solvable. We live on a really wet lot, and the house was built on old pilings from the 1940s or 50s, and we didn't really know what could be done. So we ended up starting over.
I love that. So you mentioned this notion of self-education, and this is a point that I really want to make clear and drive home. You were laid off or fired or whatever from your last job, and so many people would take the opposite route of what you did and go get another job, which is fine if that makes you happy. Like, that's totally fine. But you chose to go down a different path. And not only that, but, and this is something that I want to make really clear, so many times an opportunity like that presents itself to a lot of different people, and not everyone will go chase that opportunity because they feel like, oh, well, I'm lacking something. There's some resource, knowledge, something. Like there's something that surely I can't go down that path because I don't have what it takes to go down that path. And we talked about this a little bit before we were recording too. I don't know how many times I've heard this situation from so many extremely successful women who saw an opportunity, and they had no leg up on anyone else. They lacked knowledge. They lacked funding. They lacked experience. They lacked the right connections. Like life was not beautifully organized and perfect with tons of time to work on something. And yet they just sometimes naively and sometimes just bravely walked forward toward that opportunity instead. And I think your point about I'm going to go educate myself and learn about this is such a good one, because you did exactly that. Like this opportunity opened up for you and you, number one, recognized it, and number two, pointed yourself in that direction. And that's so cool.
Oh, thanks.
And it's not common.
Yeah. Well, when I first started playing in the green building industry, I was going to a lot of different workshops, and everybody there was either an architect, an engineer, or an interior designer. And I was none of those.
You're like,
and
what's up, MBA?
Yeah. So it was kind of a like, how am I going to fit into this world and how I'm going to convince people? But I really saw the opportunity, mostly because of my finance background, that when you invest in sustainable investments, there's a payoff. And I figured I could convince people, that financially these all make sense. And oh, by the way, you're doing better for the planet as well.
Yeah.
So it just made sense to me. And I also realized I had the luxury of it. My husband worked and had a good job, and I didn't have to make as much money as I was making before. But that's not the whole piece of it. A lot of it is the identity of what am I doing right now and how am I figuring this out? It is kind of a newer market, the whole sustainable building, green building. It's not common. And so it's like, how do you fit into that?
Yeah.
So I just did a lot of networking with people because I really wanted to work in the commercial sector and help businesses become more sustainable, and just started asking around, who's doing this? There's got to be some small consulting firms, because I initially tried to hang up a shingle by myself. And that was just really hard because it was actually, 10 years ago, and people didn't know even the jargon or the lingo as much.
Yep.
And it was also, I didn't have enough experience under my belt, I felt. So I felt like I needed to find some other people. And so I did end up finding a business and became a business partner with a company called Sustainably, where we helped businesses become more sustainable and did a lot of LEED certification. So I did that for the next 5 years.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your book. I love the smile that pops to your face. It's like this amazing thing where you create something and now it's tangible and it's sitting on the table, staring at us, and it's just awesome. So tell us a little bit about the book and what we can find in it.
So the book is called Building a Sustainable Home: Practical Green Design Choices for Your Health, Wealth, and Soul. I wrote the book for a couple different reasons. The first was when we went to build our own house and I bought all of the guidebooks. I felt like the guidebooks were a little bit sort of technical, a lot of jargon, and they throw everything at you and they don't help you really prioritize against a budget. They don't help you prioritize against your values.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah. So the whole LEED rating system, has several different categories: energy efficiency, water efficiency. And I get into that, but I map them to your values. So your values of health. What are the three main things around health? Clean water, clean air, and clean house. And then I talk about the tactics for that. For your wealth, there's three areas: energy efficiency, water efficiency, and durability. And what I mean by wealth is any of those and all of those will save you money in operating expenses every year, year after year. So you invest up front and you save money. So that's what I mean by for your wealth. And then for your soul are the pieces that actually don't directly affect your health and don't directly affect your wealth in the short run, but they actually affect all of our health and wealth in the long run. Because the three areas in there, we're talking about materials, purchasing materials and waste of materials, landscaping, and location. So each section of my book, Health, Wealth, and Soul, those are three values. Each of those has three sort of bigger strategies underneath them. So it's, to me, more accessible. and hopefully more interesting
Yeah.
and digestible to say, oh, okay, I can do that. And you can come at it from any angle that you want. You can be doing a minor remodel, a renovation, or building a new home, or just really wanting to understand more about sustainability, because I do talk about what it really means. It's been kind of a, buzzword, go
Amorphous
green,
thing.
do this, and all kinds of product manufacturers have put some seal of approval, or they say all natural, or this is go green. And I kind of try and cut through all the clutter of that and really tell it like it is.
Yeah.
I like to think that I bottom line it for people and say, here's the deal.
I love it. And I mean, the book looks much more beautiful than something called the lead reference manual. So, hey, you got a leg up on that.
It's less expensive too. The lead reference manual, I think, is $199
nice.
or something.
There you go.
It's $24.99.
Much more accessible in language and in price point. That's awesome. Friends, I am interrupting this podcast episode with a very important announcement. The Life Design Lab is here. What's Life Design Lab, you ask? Life Design Lab is a 6-week live online life design program. It combines the best of the best from the fields of design thinking and psychology to teach you a framework that you can use again and again to align your life around who you are and how you want to feel. You're only getting one shot at life, so it's so important that you make it count. Visit aprilseifert.com and click the banner at the top to get all the details, or just click the link in this episode description. Enrollment closes on January 31st, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Make this the year that you stop living by default and start living by design. Visit aprilseifert.com for more info and to sign up. I'm curious about, you mentioned you work a lot with commercial and business entities and helping them become more sustainable and that type of thing. For people in their homes, and I'm sure a lot of this is in your book, but just to kind of give people a teaser, what are some common things that people in their homes could do that that would help make their home more sustainable? Like a small handful, 3 things or something like that people could do to just make improvements in their own home? Yeah,
so there's a whole range of possibilities, from very easy and very low cost to...
Let's start there. Like if people wanted to get up tomorrow and they really wanted to do something to improve their home.
Yeah, a couple things. I think most people have heard of LED lighting, but really changing out any lamps that have the old incandescent bulb and even the compact fluorescent bulbs, switching them out for LED lights is a no-brainer financially, as well as from a time perspective, because they last so much longer that you won't have to waste your time replacing them. Mm-hmm. And you'll save money not having to replace them, and you'll save money having them operate because your electric bill will go down. Mm-hmm. So that one is kind of the biggest no-brainer. Another one is faucet aerators. You can easily install those. Even I did that, and I'm not a big do-it-yourselfer. But they can be very inexpensive, and sometimes your utility can offer them for free. And if you put those on your faucets and get like a low flow shower head, you will save water, you'll save money on your water bill, and you'll also save money on your energy bill because you won't be using as much hot water.
Interesting. I love that.
Those are really easy things to do on kind of the energy efficiency side. On the health side, my biggest one is clean water. Mm-hmm. I'm a big advocate for filtering water. And there's low-cost solutions to that and higher cost. You can go a whole house water filtration. You can get reverse osmosis systems, and you can get, smaller filters. So people just need to be aware of what contaminants are in the water. And, my philosophy is get everything out and get pure H2O, as pure as you can get. And if people wonder, well, are we still getting the minerals, that are naturally in the water? You can get that from food. You can get that from vitamins. So I'd rather just have nothing else in the water.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm thinking about the women who are listening to this. And now I'm kind of going a little bit back to where we started before. I'm thinking about women who are listening to this who might have a similar opportunity, say, in front of them. I'm curious about whether you have words of advice for people who might be going down their own windy path, because it's easy to look at people who are in the position that you're in, right? Your book is out. This is great. Like it feels like a bit of a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence, but the sentence wasn't linear. And so I'm wondering if you have advice to other women who are at the beginning of that journey or contemplating taking that windy journey.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One is I had a boss who told me why I stood apart from other people was not just, you have to have a certain amount of like raw intelligence to do the job, but having a good attitude about the work and taking initiative. So attitude and initiative are the two biggest things. And so if you have an attitude about, hey, I'm going to figure this out, and you have initiative to actually go do it, nothing should stop you from doing that.
Yeah, I love that. And something else you mentioned earlier that I think fits into that as well is you mentioned this concept of identity around, I think we were talking about it around getting into how passionate you are about sustainability and moving away from your corporate career because it just felt like this was something that really drove you. And that piece I find for people is so powerful because you're never going to allow yourself to become, or you're never going to allow yourself to stay something that you don't like. So like this discussion gets brought up a lot around money for people. So sometimes people have this negative, visceral reaction to the idea of making money. Like money is the root of all evil and rich people are so greedy and whatever. You will never allow yourself to become something you hate. And so if you're struggling to pay your bills, it's real, and struggling to like ask for more money and create that in your life, it's difficult to do it if it's going to mean you're going to become one of those people who you hate. And what I think is cool about your story is you identified this piece that you were so passionate about, that was so central to who you are, and chased after it. So it just really helped guide you and lead you in that direction. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And it's just trying to figure out where you can make money in that business if you need to. And most people do need to make money.
Yeah.
So, but it's figuring out what the business model is. It's hard. I mean, it hasn't been an easy path, and it's still, people ask, what do you do? And right now I'm a writer. I'm also an editor. I edit articles for a company called Rise. It's buildwithrise.com. And you go to their website and it says, turn any home improvement project into a sustainable one. And actually the founder found me because he was looking for a book on sustainable homes. And my book wasn't available yet. This was a year ago. So anyway, getting back to what I am, I'm a writer, I'm an editor, I'm a sustainability advisor, I'm a lead mentor. I don't have a good, concise answer when people say, what is it that you do? And I think that happens with a lot of women.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm not even telling you all the other things that I do. I mean, I serve on a nonprofit board. I'm helping a school become LEED certified. And plus I'm a mom and take care of a house. And we do work in every facet, like in every area. We work for schools, and it's just part of putting a life together and figuring out what it is that you really like and are really passionate about, and, taking time for your kids and
making it all work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And deciding that it's worth it too. Something that I talk about a lot on the podcast, and this gets a little bit heavy or big, or what, I don't know what the right adjective is, but they do research with people at the end of their lives about, looking back and what they regret, and the things that they regret are so common. It's a common set of bullet points that end up on that list. And they regret not trying, like not doing more things, not trying more things. Nobody ever says they regret doing something imperfectly. They regret the things they didn't do at all. They regret not being themselves, and they regret not allowing themselves to be happy. So meaning like, nobody ever regrets not working enough. Like, man, I could have done 70 hours instead of 60 and really not, seen my kids. Like, that isn't what people regret. And I think a lot of times women, for whatever reason, we tap into that just desire to want to experience a lot of those pieces, whether it's kids that drive you or something else. somehow it seems like we tap into that and figure out a way to cobble this together and make it work. But what's unfortunate and what I love about the way that you described it is that sometimes I think we feel like then we're not legitimate, or it's not a real job if it isn't. I mean, the first time I checked the self-employed box on something, I had an identity crisis because I'm like, oh my God, people are going to think that I just totally am not doing anything at all. And that's a big deal for me, for my identity. But it can be difficult for people who are doing what you're doing, what I'm doing, just making it work and putting it together so that all of these 80 different pieces add up to a thing that drives me.
Yeah. I mean, I wish there was one word that would just describe me when people say, what do you do? And because it's never an easy answer. It's like, well, how long do you have? I mean, I have like a 1 minute answer, but I don't have a 1 word answer.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not a CFO or a lawyer.
I'm the title of department at company. Like that's exactly what most people can say. And it's so difficult to say that.
And almost every form online that you fill out or on paper or whatever it is, it's title and company. And I have a couple companies. I have my own company that I'm working on, and I have this other company that I work for. So I like do a slash. I'm like partly green attention, partly rise, and it just doesn't, people are like, what is that?
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to identity with this too, because I think it's important. People derive a lot of self-worth from that easy sentence. I'm the vice president of marketing for Target. That's a very easy sentence. And hi, whoever the VP of marketing for Target is. I'm sorry, I just made that up on the spot. So hello, if you're listening. But it's a really easy way to give yourself identity and make yourself feel like, wow, I'm valid and I'm important. But the transition into doing what you're doing, and it was a difficult one for me to make as well, was I have to derive my value from somewhere else. And in fact, other people, so I'm in a similar position to you. I'm very fortunate that my husband has a great job. He's a physician. Like that affords me the ability to take some risks that, they're easier to take than they would be if we didn't have that safety net in place. But what that also does is it immediately makes people skeptical about what I'm doing, and they assume that it's really not very much at all. And so not only am I battling my own self, feeling like, wow, I'm a super big imposter here, and I'm not valid at all because I can't even tell people what I do and what I am. So not only that, but they know it too, and they're mirroring it back to me. What a fraud I am. Great. And did you find that? And was that difficult for you to get over?
Yeah, totally. I mean, because people say, do you work outside of the home? It's like, well, I do this and this, but I also work at home.
Sometimes I go to Starbucks.
Sometimes I go somewhere else. I go to Modern Well. No, it is a big thing, especially with titles and coming out of, I went to University of Chicago for business school, and that was very like high powered, everybody should go get these titles. But there were a lot of my female friends kind of got off the track and don't have the big titles and had to go through a lot of that sort of self-discovery of saying, is this okay? Mm-hmm. And especially because you think, well, had I stayed on this track, I could be a CFO of, such and such a corporation or something like that. And would that make me happy? And maybe saying it would feel good and it would feel validating. And then it's not like a hobby or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, well, somebody else has hired me and somebody else has validated me and somebody else has decided that this is the size of my paycheck. Are those good things? I mean, it's up to everybody to decide, but that somebody else might also be deciding your day-to-day life and the projects that you work on and the people that you work with. And so you really need to think about all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Holy cow. I didn't realize we were going to get into that topic, but it's such an important one. And, I don't think either of us are saying, you have to go down this path, you have to leave your job, you have to whatever. But for the people who are considering it, just know that your value does not lie in your title, and it doesn't lie with another person telling you that, you're valid in chasing whatever it is that you are. Like, oh my God, go pick up your pair of scissors and run out into that field. Like, just go run with your pair of scissors and you're fine. It'll be completely fine.
Yeah, but you might have to self-validate every now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Pull this episode
okay.
back up and we're going to tell you that you're awesome and you can keep running with those scissors. Oh my gosh. This has been wonderful. Tell us where we can find your book.
So it's available at Barnes & Noble, it's available at independent bookstores, and it is, of course, available on Amazon.
Everything. You can get everything on Amazon. Man, like you can just order like a bouncy castle to somebody's house on Amazon. It'll just show up there the next day. It's crazy. Awesome. This has been wonderful. I could seriously sit here and gab with you all day long. And FYI, I think I mentioned this before, we are recording from the most beautiful home. We got kind of diverted today and we're sitting in Melissa's house, and it is the most airy, giant window, straight lines, gorgeous, like architectural feat of amazingness. So I wish you guys all could see where I'm at right now because it's absolutely gorgeous. So go buy her book and you will understand what I'm talking about. It's all about building your own and creating your own sustainable home. So I hope you guys will check it out. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, you guys, I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Melissa Rapapport Shifman, sustainability expert and amazing new author. All right, of course, there are a few things that I want to hit on, and let's start with the obvious one right away, this notion of sustainability. We had a really interesting conversation as I was leaving Melissa's home after this interview. We started talking about something that I had heard. I honestly don't remember where I read it, but another expert in this arena was talking about how, we're at a really critical point right now with the planet in that our actions as humans are changing the way that our climate is operating, and it's impacting where animals are able to live and how our food supply is happening. It's causing changes in natural disasters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like things are changing and it's because of us. And this expert, it was really interesting because they made a point that I had never heard anyone make before. And Melissa actually said that this is something she talks about in her book. They both have said, there's no denying the fact that we have caused a lot of damage to our planet. But here's the thing that people don't realize. Even if we do nothing and we continue to do the damage that we're doing now and we don't work to change anything, the planet will still be here. So even when catastrophe happens, the planet will still be here. It's just, it won't be habitable by us. So it will be here, but we won't. And so in a lot of ways, these efforts are not efforts to quote unquote save the planet. They're efforts to save our species. It's really wild when you think about it. The weight of the importance of these types of efforts. So I wanted to make that point because sometimes it's easy with things like this to say, I'll do it tomorrow, or that's not something that I need to focus on, or other people can work on it, or other people are working on it, and kind of pass the buck. But in this case, it's one of those times where we all need to just do our part and chip in and do what we can. Maybe you can't do everything that's in this book, but maybe you can do a few things. And even that would make a big difference. So just something to consider. The earth will still be here, but we won't. That's wild. The other two things I want to talk about. Number one, I loved the conversation that we got into right at the end. And honestly, I had to kind of hurry it up because I'd already taken up a ton of Melissa's time due to the circumstances around us recording. It kind of turned into a bit of a cluster, my fault. But it was such a great discussion because we put so much of our self-worth and put so much of our value as people, we place it in external things. So things like our title or whether someone else values us enough to give us a paycheck of a certain level, or someone else telling us, yes, you got a job, meaning, yes, you are valid in being able to call yourself this title or work in this field. We really give that power away to other people. And in reality, I heard this with Melissa talking about being, this vice president of business development at a company. I've heard this, again, I mentioned it, a future guest who will be on the podcast said the same thing. They were a very high up executive at a very prestigious company in the Minneapolis area, had a beautiful office, had arrived and realized that was not what made them happy. And ultimately, that is not what made them who they were. Their self-worth was not tied up in their title and what they did for their job. And that's amazing. That's an amazingly difficult thing to decouple. And I'll admit, I had a very hard time doing that when I first, I made the decision not to go back to, actually, my situation was very similar to Melissa's. I was laid off from a company, and it was right before I was going to have a baby. It was right before the holidays. It doesn't sound as horrible as it is. Like, it was a fine parting from the company. They're great people, great place, no big deal. But I did find myself in that position where, like, wow, not by choice, I don't have a job. What do I want to do? And I think it was just the enormity of this situation of coming up on the holidays and almost I was literally weeks away, like 3-4 weeks away from having a baby when it happened. And I think the enormity of the situation made me really pause and think and get very intentional about how I chose to move forward. And it sounds like Melissa did the same thing. And at that time, when I decided to not go back, it was really difficult for me because I had always been a type A high achiever seeking external validation. And let me tell you from personal experience, if you need external validation, if you seek it because that's the thing that makes you feel valid and feel of value, you're always going to be looking because there's never going to be enough. And ultimately, that's not what makes you valuable. And ultimately, that's not what makes you valid or worthwhile as a person. Don't give that power away to someone else that you're just waiting for somebody else to tell you that you are valid or worthwhile. You're valid or worthwhile without their opinion. And you don't need mine either telling you that. Conjure that up for yourself. Your value does not come from your title. You're an amazing person, and I don't care what your title is, and I don't care what your job is. The last thing I want to hit before I close out this week is, we talked about opportunity showing up in front of us and who's willing to take that opportunity and run with it and who maybe doesn't and is afraid. I've heard this time and time again from folks, outside of this podcast, just people I encounter. I couldn't do that because, and then they'll name a barrier. And then in this weird paradox world that I've created for myself, I'll hop on a podcast interview literally hours later, and I'll hear from a woman who is in a very similar situation, broke, not married, baby, no education. I mean, you name it, same situation or more difficult, who found a path forward. And sometimes it can be as simple as an opportunity presents itself and we just don't feel like we can pursue it because we don't have enough experience. We don't have the right resources. We don't have the right money. We don't have the right network. We don't have the right training or degree or piece of paper or blessing from somewhere else to tell us that we can go for that opportunity. I'm going to let you in on a very personal secret right now, and I am dead serious. I don't tell you guys stuff that I'm not willing to eat myself. That made no sense. That was a terrible analogy. You can laugh at me in your car. It's fine. One of my goals for 2019 is literally the way that I've described it is 2019, I'm running with scissors. I am doing things that I have no business doing because I have seen over and over again, both in the podcast and in other tangible examples, people in my life, they have picked up their pair of scissors, the thing they had no business touching. They had no business doing it. No degree, no person telling them that it's okay, no experience in that area. They had no business doing it. And they ran their butt off into the field and had a great time doing it. And everything was okay. And here I am behind my little rock going, oh my God, did they die? Are they still okay? That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. These people that are doing that have nothing on me and nothing on you. You have just as much intelligence, courage, when you muster it up, resources, background, or in fact, you have just as little as they had. And the only difference between you and them is that they picked up that pair of scissors and they started running with it. So my goal in 2019 is to pick up a bunch of pairs of scissors and run, because ultimately, it's just not that risky and it's just not that big of a deal. And that's literally the only way that people have achieved these massive things and massive success is that they just didn't care. And they just didn't care that they had no business doing it. They just did it anyway. And that's amazing. And that is so inspiring. And so that's what I'm doing. And that's what I'm going to issue a challenge to you to do. Pick up a pair of scissors and run with it. Like, not realistically, please don't hurt yourself, but metaphorically, pick up that pair of scissors and go run with it. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.